On this edition of Native Report, we head to the Minnesota State Capitol building for the first ever Sovereignty Day.
We attend Reclaiming the Narrative, an evening of author readings and rap music.
And we learn about the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior's effort to preserve the Ojibwe language. We also learn what we can do to lead healthier lives and hear from our elders on this edition of Native Report.
Production of Native Report is made possible by grants from the Blandin Foundation, the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation, and the Shakopee-Mdewakanton Sioux Community.
Welcome to Native Report. I'm Rita Aspinwall.
And I'm Ernie Stevens. An historic convening was held in Minnesota State Capitol building as leaders from all 11 of the state's federally recognized Native nations met with state lawmakers in a day-long educational event called Sovereignty Day. It was a day filled with cultural teachings, tribal history, education, and most importantly, open dialogue.
As a drum group sang a flag song, veterans from the 11 sovereign Native nations in Minnesota marched or danced in time to the beat as they entered the Minnesota House of Representatives. Today, on this President's Day, the state celebrated Sovereignty Day.
Good morning, members, and welcome to Sovereignty Day at the Minnesota House of Representatives. Minnesota has 11 federally recognized tribes. These 11 tribal nations are sovereign nations with their own government-to-government relationships at the federal, state, and local level. I've set aside today as Sovereignty Day at the Capitol to help educate members and the public on what that means. I'd also like to give a special thank you to Lieutenant Governor Peggy Flanagan. She and I started thinking about doing this 2 years ago, and it's nice to see the day has come to fruition.
This is an incredible, incredible day. As I was sitting in the back, just thinking about how many times we had talked about the possibility of this day, and now it is a reality. It feels very, very humbling and very powerful. Our tribal communities and their leaders have historically been left out of conversations that happen in the legislature, and I should add, in the executive branch. So thank you to all of you who are here to learn more about our tribal communities across the state and how we can improve government-to-government relations. For all of you who came here with an open heart and open ears, let me, if I may, impart the one thing I've seen over the years inside and outside government that I think is at the crux of all of this work. Native communities are often invisible to policymakers. And for generations, governing has often been done to our people instead of with our people. It doesn't take much work to meaningfully consult with our tribal governments when bills we write and policies we consider affect Indian country. I would also like to add on this Sovereignty Day that the most important thing to take away is that sovereignty is not something that was given to Native people. We have always had it. As Governor and Lieutenant Governor of Minnesota, we are trying to rewrite the book on how states work with tribal governments, and I know that the House is doing this good work too. There's never been a Native woman in this executive office before. I'm figuring things out as I go along. And I hope and I ask that you'll give me feedback and do it in a way that helps me grow. We ask that you stand with us and work with us to make this happen. Let's be the nation's model for this work, working hand in hand with our executive branch, our legislature, and our tribal governments. Today is a really, really important day, and I'm honored and humbled to be a small part of it. Chimigwech, thank you.
Sovereignty Day is the first time all 11 Native nations and their leaders were invited to speak in the House chambers. Some shared personal stories, some shared grievances, but all came together in in the spirit of cooperation.
It's a historical day that we can be here to help educate all of you. I don't think history has been written from our side. I don't think it's been taught the way it was. The Dakota people have lived here for a long time in this valley. We have historically hunted, fished, and lived on these lands. We existed in a culture of collaboration, not ownership, when it comes to the land. Resettlement efforts changed our people's culture and history forever. Our community recently honored the memory of 38 Dakota that were hung. This event, conducted by the U.S. Army, was the largest mass execution in the country's history. In the same winter of the execution, Dakota people were forced to walk more than 100 miles from Mankato to Fort Snelling, where they were held in the camps. We just had a little debate on that in the paper about whether that was a good thing or bad thing. We don't believe it was a good thing.
Bujuanin, Cathy Chavers, Indigenous Ogama. I am Cathy Chavers, Tribal Chairwoman of the Boisfort Band of Chippewa. And I also want to say I'm the president of the Minnesota Chippewa Tribe, which is our 6 bands of Fond du Lac, Grand Portage, Leech Lake, White Earth, Mille Lacs, and then Boisfort. I'm very honored to be here before you today, and I really feel this is a very historic moment because history is being made because tribal leaders are in the House of Representatives today to provide some education. And education is key. I love what the tribal leaders are saying. There's a lot of historical trauma out there, and you just can't get over that. I was born and raised off the reservation. I did not learn my language and culture. I'm learning it now, and I've learned quite a bit. The language is very difficult. There's different dialects, but it's something that's been lost through historical trauma. And you'll find that through the education that you're going to receive today of how the boarding schools played a huge part in the loss of ourselves, our culture, and our language.
Like many of my brothers and sisters said, it's hard for us to stand up here and not talk about all the injustices that happen to our people. But also, it's important that we bridge the gap and you guys understand what it is that we've gone through as Native people. Now, all of you did not create these wrongs, but it's important to recognize the wrongs of the past if we mean to correct them, if we mean to move forward in a good way. Come and visit our communities. You'll see great pride and strength in who we are. You'll see our children speaking our language, but you'll also see poverty. You'll also see a lack of housing. You'll also see a lack of resources. And when you see that, when you see those people struggling, I guarantee you in your heart, you'll want to do the right thing. And by doing that, that will benefit all of us.
A portion of the day was also devoted to training for legislators based on the tribal state relations training developed by the University of Minnesota Duluth. The day is one step closer to a deeper understanding between the state of Minnesota and the 11 sovereign Native nations.
Bunions are a common problem. The medical term for bunion is hallux valgus. This is when tissue or bone at the base of the big toe moves out of place. Years of pressure and improper motion forces the big toe to bend toward the others. This can be very painful for some people, and a bunion has a big lump at the base of the first toe. That joint carries much of your weight when walking and is why it becomes deformed, and also is why bunions can hurt so much. Sometimes these can be too painful to even wear a shoe. Bunions can run in families, but also can be worsened by the shoes we wear. High heels with pointed toes or cowboy boots can force the big toe inward. When you're young and looking cool in those shoes, your joints are still flexible. As we get older, joints start to stiffen up, and a bunion that was just a big lump before can become painful. People with rheumatoid arthritis are also more prone to bunions. Bunions are permanent once they form, and the only permanent correction is surgery to straighten the joint out to take out the excess bone and tissue. There are some things short of surgery that can make living with bunions more tolerable. These include weight loss and wearing well-fitting, low-heeled shoes with a wide toe area, shoe inserts to help position the foot correctly, warm soaks, and night splints. A podiatrist specializes in conditions of the foot and ankle and can help with everything short of surgery and will be the surgeon if needed. Sometimes surgery is the only option if nothing else is working. As bunions worsen, they can affect other parts of the foot and cause hammer toes, pain in the ball of the foot, also called metatarsalgia, and bursitis and other problems. When surgery is finally indicated, the main goal is to return the big toe to its proper position. The surgeon will make sure all the ligaments, bones, tendons, and other structures are in the correct order. There are more than 150 different types of bunion surgery, and about a half dozen of them are most commonly used. Sometimes the joint has to be fused solid to allow walking again. Your provider can help you with all of this and can refer you to a podiatrist when that time comes. Remember to call an elder. They've been waiting for your call. I'm Dr. Arnie Vinio, and this is Health Matters.
A unique music and literary event held on the Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College campus offered a late afternoon, early evening of entertainment by award-winning author Therese Marie Mailhot and rap artist Thomas X. The event was called Reclaiming the Narrative, but it was all about reclamation in all forms.
Reservation, Minnesota State gear. It's the natives up north, ripping the rest of course. Never forget us, we never defeated, we never surrender, we never retreated, go. This one's for the homie Floyd, also for
The music of rap artist Thomas X played to a small crowd in the Fond du Lac Tribal and Community College Amphitheater and Commons as part of Reclaiming the Narrative, an evening of story, song, and the arts. An event that organizers hope sheds light on the issue of reclamation from the Native perspective.
At our college here and in our program particularly, our program is Anishinaabe Gikandasawanan, the people's way of knowing. So many things that we do is really all about reclaiming knowledge, reclaiming intelligences, reclaiming our language, reclaiming our art. So it's really about reclamation. And certainly at a tribal and community college, we should be doing that. And we should be helping others to see how they can do it. You know, in our communities, there's a lot of struggle yet. And I think Thomas X has just such a beautiful voice in that way, because not only is he a voice of resilience and also a voice of recovery, but he's a voice of hope.
In addition to Thomas X, award-winning author Therese Marie Mailhot was also a featured artist for the event. The media both use to get their message across are very much different, but both draw on personal experiences that reclaim the narrative.
I started writing poetry in high school as a form of therapy. I was a sophomore, and in the last classroom during the Red Lake school shooting in 2005. So one of the people I was talking to suggested writing poetry to help with coping. And around 2011, I started performing on stage. I've always rapped about, what I believe in and my life surroundings and my heritage and my reservation. I have an idea of who my fan base is, and a lot of it's younger Ojibwe. It's the Ojibwe youth, and if they could hear me speak Ojibwe in something like a rap song, which you probably normally wouldn't hear Ojibwe mowing in, maybe it could do something for them that it kind of sparks interest in their culture and language. And also just to represent, I feel as Native people, we're very underrepresented in the entertainment industry altogether.
I'm an author. I wrote Heartberries, a memoir. It's a story about growing up First Nations in abject poverty and surviving the long shadows of shame of trauma. And it also is a memorial to my mother and trying to humanize the experiences of my father. And moving past trauma into my new life, it was important to write it down. I bound my first book in grade school, and I showed my teacher, and he thought I had a high vocabulary, and my mother told me school was a choice because for her it had been very traumatic, and for my grandmother as well, who went to residential school. So, you know, I think it led to me dropping out pretty early at 13, and it wasn't until I went to get my GED, you know, at 24, that I really realized I could do something other than be a young mother or try to get assistance or a good job just getting by. There's chapters in my book about sexual violence and Indigenous women. And there's also, you know, passages where I'm talking about that lived experience and trying to relate it to someone who maybe doesn't empathize or see me as anything beyond the stigmas that we carry. So for me to make real my experiences and to have my own voice and to also take ownership of my body and also promote the idea that we're more than just a stereotype, you know, even if we're single mothers, you know, we're more than the label of single mother. So for me, I kept pushing through the things that made me angry and the things that made me sad to try to find my story. We all have stories, you know, and they're all very important.
The one overall message that is common between Thomas X and Therese is that culture never dies. This event also recognized how others in the local community are reclaiming the narrative.
I think I am reclaiming the idea that when we speak our own stories, they're more complicated than how the media portrays Indigenous people, or how they always make us default to relics like artifacts or headdresses or the past and how we are broken. And I think I'm reclaiming the idea that we have hurdles and we have disparities within our own communities, but we are very much so strong, you know, and it's not necessarily resilient because I don't recover quickly, but we're, you know, more than resilient. I think like just individuals, even if they're non-Native, understanding that they don't need to carry the shame of their culprits, right? Like if we've survived abuse, we don't need to feel shame about it. You know, that's like their shame to own. And I think the more we believe that, the more open we would be that it's not uncommon that we've experienced these traumas, even if they're little t or big T traumas, you know, and I think it would help us relate to one another. Like we have more in common.
You know, my music, I talk a lot about Ojibwe heritage, history, I talk a lot about my reservation and my own life experiences. In Native community, the youth especially, we're so reserved with our emotions. We're what in Ojibwe country we say Indianish. We're so shy. And you know, and I'm no different. I grew up that way too. So I like try to just be an example that, you know, hey, you can be expressive because it's healthy. I believe that it's very healthy to express yourself, and especially if it's in an artistic outlet like rap music. It's important that Natives tell other Natives what's going on and how we can help each other.
Locally, we have a ton of reclamation already happening, hey? For instance, Sarah House is this amazing young woman that decided that what she wanted to is she wanted to reclaim health, which is running. And she became this huge inspiration to women in the community too, who are now runners. It's about claiming our own stories and claiming our own life and then stepping into it.
Can you tell me who taught you how to make the faceless dolls?
My grandma. My grandma was born on Madeline Island. She taught me and my cousin at the same time, and we asked her why it didn't have a face on it. And we lived up on top of the hill, and then there was a creek that ran around the around the hill. So she took us by the hand and walked us down there, and she knelt by the creek, and she said she looked into the creek, and we did too because we were only 5. And we asked her why there was no faces, and she says, well, whose face should I take from the water spirits? And we had already known that legend because she had told it to us, that that's the only place your face your image is supposed to be is in the water.
On December 7, 2010, the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior Chippewa Reservation Business Committee passed a resolution making Ojibwe the official language spoken by the nation. All three of their district's community centers hold language tables, and they are now using modern technology to help teach, learn, and preserve the Ojibwe language.
It is an overcast Saturday morning as this group meets at the Fond du Lac Anishinaabemowin Wakaigan, which is Ojibwe for Language House. The gray skies didn't dampen their enthusiasm for speaking the Ojibwe language.
I'm going into my 5th year. When I first got here, they didn't have a program. So that first year, that's all I did was get the lay of the land. And then the second year I started, and I did come in with a 3-year strategic plan of my own, which I was following for the language program. So in the second year was the building year, get some resources together. The language table was one of the first things that we started up again. It's grown quite a bit. We have actually now an international reputation, because in June of last year I took Defoe with me. He's one of our language and curriculum specialists, and we went and did a panel presentation in Alberta for the Stabilizing Indigenous Languages conference.
What arose from that conference was a multimedia Ojibwe language anthology project.
Everybody has different ways of learning that are most beneficial to them, and I think audio is the proven method of learning. I think the time-proven method is just to socialize, to be amongst one another, to gain the fluency skills, the understanding, the confidence, and the knowledge, especially to be at ease around folks that are more proficient than you, that use our language.
My position is I help orientate the elders in the recordings to make sure they're talking about, topics. So for me, it's actually a really big learning experience, because I get to sit around and listen to these elders converse with each other, about these really important topics. And then we go back and we listen to them talk again, and we write down everything they say in Ojibwe, and we translate it. And then we talk to them about, is this translation right? Is this good? Is there, would you say this differently in English? So it's definitely, for me, it's a huge learning experience.
Rounding out the group is Tom Jack and Pat Northrup.
I've been teaching and helping with the language here in this area for probably almost 10 years now. I am a first language speaker. We have to know who we are, we have to know where we come from. I'm really glad to be in this community helping with the language.
I'm a learner of the language. I'm a Dakota, Bade Wakantua, Dakota. And efforts are being made in all of Indian country, I think, now today. The resources they have nowadays is just phenomenal. And to hear, every time I see Ricky, he says things to me in Ojibwe, and I love it. I'm a cheerleader for the language.
Pat and her husband, award-winning author, the late Jim Northrup, were also instrumental in establishing the Kiwanis Language Camp held annually on the reservation. As long as this group at the Language House is doing the work they love, the Ojibwe language will always have a home.
There are some speakers that will say it's changing, and it's changing immensely when we start to write it down. That's why I'm trying to move more toward audio to get the speakers that we have to record for us. And anybody can listen to that anywhere. Even if you only remember a few words, as long as you use them, it just goes a long way.
I've been surrounded by people my entire life who are practically fluent, whether they're a first language speaker or whether they're self-taught. And so I see people everywhere putting tons of dedication and hard work into the language and themselves, and the progress they make is immense. So I'm not afraid of it going away at all.
The Ojibwe language gives to the world a unique worldview. Most of the elders are, we have just a few left that speak our language, so it makes it difficult for to converse on a daily basis, but they do contribute in other ways, and so that's a challenge that we have. We know that our language is so-called endangered, but it has a spirit to it, and I think the spirit will live on.
For more information about Native Report or the stories we've covered, look for us on the web at nativereport.org, on Facebook, and on YouTube.
Thank you for spending this time with your friends and neighbors in Indian Country. I'm Ernie Stevens.
And I'm Rita Aspinwall. Join us next time for another Native Report.
Rita Aspinwall is an enrolled member of the Fond du Lac Band of Lake Superior, Chippewa, and is an ICWA social worker with Fond du Lac Social Services. Ernie Stevens is a member of the Oneida Nation of Wisconsin and is a film and television producer. Production of Native Report is made possible by grants from the Blandin Foundation, the Duluth Superior Area Community Foundation, and the Shakopee-Mdewakanton Sioux Community.